Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that we do every week. In fact, we did 2 last week, and we are getting tons of questions right now. I think there were like 38 or 39 written down. I think I have 23 here to try to, what I'm gonna do in this video right here, but they're coming fast and furious. Thank you guys so much for asking great questions every week. And you can ask questions down in the comment section below the video, and that's where we pick from each week. I think you can see Holly down here below me. I said in the video the other day, she's actually been in a cone for a few days because she's got a place above her eye that she won't stop messing with, and they really can't do anything about it. She's 16, they can't put her under to cut the, to really do anything about it. So she's on an antibiotic, and it's healed over, and she's not messing with it right this minute. So she's not in the cone. She figured out how to, even no matter what, to get her eye up against things so that she can, to just constantly messing with it. But finally, I think we've moved past that, and she's up and about, and she's been in the garden most of the week. She'll be in, I think she's probably in the background of several videos you guys will see in the next few days. She's been out here filming with us for several days now. Let's see, the weekly garden planner is $50 off for the next 2 weeks, and it's just a week by week, what should you be doing in your garden list. And again, that $50 sale will end at the end of March. Thank you guys who have purchased it, and thank you to those who are considering it. Also, I opened up a week in April for consultations. I had the whole month of April blocked off originally, and May started to fill in, so I realized I had a little bit of time there in April. So there's 4 or 5 days in April. If you're interested in one of the garden consultations, you can sign up for that over on the website. That's where the weekly garden planner and the Learn to Garden video series and the t-shirts and the consultations, all that can be signed up for over there on the HortTube.com website. Let's see, I'm gonna put her in a minute. I did fertilize back here this week, and so that there's a little bit of that smell left in the air, although we watered afterwards, but she's pretty into it. she loves the smell of that organic fertilizer. Okay, let's see. Question 1 is actually a 1A and 1B. Somebody asked for a recommended bag compost. They can't use the big one like we use, the Soil3. So we order Soil3 compost from Soil3, and they just deliver it here. And I think it's like North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia where you can get Soil3. Maybe some rural areas that they don't deliver to in those 3 states. And I think it's available in a few other states as well, but under another company. Another company does it. So you can check in your area. That's a 1 cubic yard bag of compost, and they just deliver it here. We still have about a half a bag out by the driveway. I haven't gotten around to yet, but anytime I can buy bulk materials, I prefer to buy bulk materials. So if you have any access to borrowing or renting a small pickup or whatever, I would go to your local landscape yard and find a compost there if you can. I don't like buying things in bags all that much that I haven't seen before because I don't know what's inside of them. But I have bought lots and lots of black cow manure over the years, and I've bought some mushroom compost over the years. They're all pretty much, compost is compost. Once you compost something, it's compost, whether it started out as manure and other things or started out as mushrooms and other things. Compost is compost. I probably am not going to go and buy the least expensive compost product that I can that seems to be over wet and over heavy, on a pallet at one of the stores. I'm probably not going to do that. But again, I'll buy cow manure, I'll buy some of the mushroom compost, but I'd prefer to get it in bulk in some way or another, and that's a way I can actually see it. A lot of times, something gets trapped in a bag like that, it can become anaerobic. So it can go from, it composted, it heated up, it was great material maybe, and then it goes into that bag, and then it's wet inside that plastic bag, and it sits. Then they wrap that plastic around the outside of it, put it on a truck, and then it gets carried to that place, and it sits out in the sun and gets hot inside those bags, and it can become anaerobic inside that bag, where you open it up and it smells a little off, doesn't smell earthy, like compost should smell. So anyway, if I can get it in bulk in some way or another, I prefer to do it that way. Will too much mulch eventually bury your perennials? Should they be dug up and replanted so they don't end up in a low ball? So a couple things there. Yes, mulch can in time get too heavy for some of your perennials to come up through. And you'll notice, just be analyzing it year to year. You know, if your daffodils, you know, your daffodil bulbs are coming up and they don't seem bigger and better and fuller than they were the year before, it could be the result of you burying them too much, and they could be under fertilized too. Obviously, there's some other reasons that could happen, or too wet, that kind of thing. But you know, I've got a couple spaces out here where I know I've gotten my mulch a little bit too thick, and some of the perennials seem to be having a much harder time fighting their way up through that in a few places. That's why I'm not mulching this spring. So I'm just kind of analyzing it that way and seeing if things should wake up bigger, better, fuller than they were last year. And if they don't, then I am underdoing something or overdoing something. And that's where I'm, you know, kind of analyzing that. But yeah, some perennials can have a tougher time coming up through thick mulch. Now, with that said, about digging them up and getting them back to the soil level, yes. And also, perennials probably need, most, not all, but most perennials probably need to be dug up every 3 to 5 years anyway, and divided and or raised up or whatever. I mean, there's just, you know, I've said this for a long time, you know, trees I'm planting out here and thinking I'm never gonna have to do anything to them other than maybe pruning on them a little bit. Shrubs, you get about 20 years out of them, a lot of them, and they just kind of look tired after that. And it's time to replace them or reset them. And then herbaceous perennials, the things that, well, some of them die back to the ground and some of them don't, but a lot of times they overcrowd themselves over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period of time, or they're less happy than they originally were when I planted them, whatever. Sometimes they can go really just take off and be fantastic and then start to crash, and those are indicators, or they're overcrowded and they have less flowers. There's a lot of indicators in there, but almost everything between about 3 and 5 years, perennial wise, needs to be popped up. You know, that'd even be your daffodils probably need to be popped out of the ground and divided and spread out a bit, you know, to where they're crowding themselves, because they end up with a lot of foliage and just a few flowers if they're happy and they're doing well. So I just think there's a time frame in there, regardless of whether you're burying them in mulch or whatever, where perennials probably need to be rehabbed in some way, dug up and divided, dug up and split, dug up to just raise them up because they don't seem like they're staying too wet or whatever in the winter time. So lots of reasons you may have to dig them up, and what action you take will just be based on the reason you dug them up. Let's see. Somebody just said, if you're doing heavy pruning, watch out for birds' nests. And that's true, because there are more birds out here than I have. We've never had this many birds out here. This is wild bird. We went a few years, I think there was a few disease issues out there. I know they were reported down in South Carolina and some other places, asking people to take bird feeders down and that kind of thing, because there were some bird diseases going around. But it seems like for whatever reason, like every bird lived last year or something. This place is just, in the whole neighborhood, everywhere I go, there's 8 robins sitting in every yard, it seems like. It's kind of wild. And they're going through food quickly out here, but they're nesting. And so I've got some heavy pruning to do. And if you remember, if you've been watching the channel for a while, I couldn't prune a loropetalum back here 2 winters ago because I waited a little late and they had nested. There was a nest in there and I didn't want to disturb it. So last year I got in there a little earlier and got it pruned. I'm hoping I get to prune it. I'm going to prune it as soon as it flowers, and it's budded up to flower right now. This loropetalum behind me is starting to open a few. Now I think you can see that that's the dwarf one is starting to bloom, but the larger one over there is just budded and hasn't started blooming yet. Let's see. Somebody has a bottle brush in Gulf Shores, Alabama. It's all brown from the winter. What should they do? I just had in a video this week, I pruned back the pomegranate back here, and it had gone. I could see where it had been damaged, and the dead parts of the plant up near the top, right about now, this time of year, you'll start to see the bark peeling off of them where they're dead. And then you can just go down the plant till you find the spot. You can scratch it with your thumbnail and find the spot on the branch where it's still green, and then you can just cut it back to there if you want to go ahead and do that. Or alternatively, you just wait for the thing to start to wake back up, and it'll tell you where it's alive and where it's dead at that time, and you just cut it down to there. So, but I went ahead on the pomegranate the other day. I could just tell the stems up at the top foot or so of it were 8 to 12 inches of it were black. And then I just scratched with my thumb until I got down to a spot that was green, and I cut it right there. And so that's all you really have to do. Hopefully it's not brown, black all the way to the ground and peeling all the way to the ground, because it could be, I mean, obviously something could be dead. But I'm finding that the damaged things out here, it's, you know, are minor. You know, they're a third, a couple of things are died back about a third. No big deal. Cut them back. It's like I got a free pruning, right? I didn't have to think about where to prune it this year because nature took care of exactly where I should prune it. Somebody's got an Itea Henry's Garnet, and they can't find any internet pruning info, when and how. So typically you prune them after flowering. So that's going to depend on where you live. In the deep south, I think this person was in zone 9. They're going to bloom very early, like March and April, and then you can prune them afterwards. Up further north you go, because he's quite cold hardy. The later they're going to flower. So maybe early summer if you're in, zone 5. But after they finish flowering, you can prune them. So you could do that general pruning on them if you wanted to at that time. I typically, it's a suckering shrub. And so you probably want to control some of the suckers on it by cutting them all the way down to the ground. And you can also, at that time, you can kind of analyze it. The oldest branches that are in it, if it's an old stand of Itea, I probably want to cut the really oldest, and you can look down into the bottom of the plant. You can tell which branches are older. Obviously, they'll be bigger. The diameter will probably be bigger on them, right? And but also they'll probably look a little gnarly. You can cut some of those all the way down to the ground and let some of those new stems take their place in the future, and those will probably be a little more vigorous growth and bloom a little better in the future. So there's that strategy of taking about a third out every winter all the way to the ground. And you can do that in the winter time. And then if you need to do any general kind of shaping on the top of it, that would be done after pruning. So that's the two ways in which you would go about pruning them. You can thin the suckering down by taking out some of the old stuff when it's dormant in the wintertime and it's easy to see it. Then it'll come out and bloom. And then if you needed to do a crazy limb or something on it at that time, you can just do that pruning after flowering. That would be my thoughts on it. Somebody asked for me to show the Tokyo Tower Cyananthus. Let's see. Let's see. You can see it right there in the center of the frame here. That's the Tokyo Tower Chinese fringe tree. It looks fantastic. I guess that's about 4 years in the ground, and it is right now probably, I'm gonna say 14 feet, something like that. Mine does not bloom as well as a few others that I've seen out in the world. And I think that is partly because it's in a little bit too much shade right there. It's been backed up against that wood line right there, and it's allowed it to really kind of grow big and tall, and it's really nicely shaped, as you can see there. I think it's getting itself up now in height where it's in the sun a little earlier in the morning. The sun comes up over the front of the house, and so it was blocked in the front of the house, and then it would get a little bit of sun, and then the back line would shade it. But now it's going to get access to earlier and earlier sun every day. So I think every year it's going to get another extra hour of sun than it had the previous year. And I think I'll start seeing it flower a little more in the future. But that thing's got just great structure back there. Beautiful foliage, and even without flowers, I would highly recommend that Tokyo Tower Cyananthus. Or it's basically a fastigiate or upright Chinese fringe tree. We have a great native fringe tree as well. Likely one will go in over there pretty soon. Let's see. Somebody has plants for seasonal wet spot areas and hard, and so they have seasonal wet spot areas, and then it's hot and dry at other times. They're wet red. See, I've said this in the past. I've said when you have these seasonally changeable areas, that's really a good time to lean on a lot of our native plants. A lot of our native plants grow in seasonally wet areas. A lot of them. A lot of the Itea. that we just mentioned. Great native plant, almost always see it growing in the water and seasonally wet and dry spaces, right? That's where we're gonna see that thing growing. And then they said their red twig dogwoods and bottle brush are doing well there. Well, another example of two of our native plants that like kind of wetter conditions, or seasonally changeable wet and dry conditions. So I would just lean into that, you know, and look for, you know, Clethra is another one, American Beautyberry is another one that we already have over there. Some of these viburnum, you know, will take seasonally wet areas. So a lot, that's why I would lean into that. That northeast corner, especially for us here, typically in the southeast, where in the wintertime it's just wet and shady, and then in the summertime it's really scorched earth because the sun goes a little north of us for a few weeks there in the summertime and really cooks that side of the house for a few weeks. But lean into that, and there, you know, and you kind of confirming what I've always said, was a lot of our native plants kind of grow in those conditions kind of naturally. Swampy lowland areas in North Carolina and South Carolina and Georgia and Florida. Let's see. How does one acclimate annual perennials purchased from greenhouses to the outdoors? So that was Friday's video. As you're watching this, I talked about purchasing plants with new growth on them. You know, I held up this, you know, here's a Farfugium that, you know, plant's hardy here, but this one's got a lot of new growth on it because we bought it out of the greenhouse at Plant Delights a couple of weeks ago now. And so you know, I don't want to be putting this in the ground. We've got another month before our average last frost date. So I'm going to just take it in and out. I want it out here in the sun. So I would get them out in the sun, because this time of year, the sun still, it feels much warmer than it has. I mean, we had an 80-degree day a couple of days ago, and we're backed off about 20 degrees today. But on that 80-degree day, it felt really warm on my skin for sure, but the sun's still on a rather low angle over here. It's still tracking in the south over here, you know, east to west, obviously, but it's still tracking slightly. As I'm looking right now toward the south, you can see the sun hitting me right here, right? So it's still on low enough of an angle that you can go ahead and transition that stuff out into the sun without worrying about burning it a whole lot, and get it outside on days when you can. So we don't have, you know, if I pull up my 10-day forecast right now for us, I don't think we have anything that's even threatening at all. So I have a 39-degree day 8 days from now. That may change. I'll monitor that between now and then, obviously, but in the next 7 days, I don't have anything, and all the days are between 60 for a high and 75 for a high. So I want this stuff out here in the sun. So get them. If they've been in a really dark place, be careful transitioning that. Even on the low angled sun, you may still figure out a way to burn them. So just bring them out in the morning for a few hours, a few more hours the next day, a few more hours the next day. Maybe start with like 3 morning sun hours and then go to 4 and then 5 and then middle sun, and then leave them out after that. Even the shade things. I've got shade things out here in the full sun right now because the sun, again, is on a slightly lower angle than it will be in a month or two. Okay. But keep them outside as much as you possibly can, and just be prepared to protect them on the nights that you may get a frost or a freeze. Let's see. So somebody asked if it's too late to transplant Chinese snowball viburnum that is planted too high. They're in a coastal area. 3 years in the ground. Mine is budded up like crazy over there. I was looking at it earlier today. I mean, it is absolutely fully budded up over there. So if I was going to move it this late and it had all those flower buds on it, I would probably be pruning some of those flowers off. So it's not too late to move it, but it may be too late to move it and expect it to then fully flower in 2 or 3 weeks. So for me, if I was, you know, we've been tree farming that Chinese snowball viburnum over there. If you're following along with the channel, I'll show it the next couple weeks. For sure, it'll be on the channel because it's budded up like crazy. But I think you'd want to sacrifice some of the flowers that are on it. It'd be a lot to ask for that plant to move right now and then have the 40 very large inflorescences that are going to be, you know, on it in the next few weeks. How is Griffin's training going to get him into the landscape more? He's actually been out here with us, and he was in a few videos when we were doing the piece over there, but on a leash. He was out here the day before I fertilized earlier this week. We kept him out here with us for about an hour and a half or so, and he did fine. He gets out of sight, and I have to call him back occasionally, but he's better, but I don't think he's a dog I could ever trust fully. And it's not necessarily, I mean, he's just smell this, move here, smell this, move, you know, he's just all over the place. And I don't think he'd be trying to leave. I think it would just be that his circles would get wider and wider and wider until he couldn't find his way back. I think that's what would happen with Griffin. So I don't think I'll ever be able to fully trust him, but I think he's calming a bit just because his age is kicking in a little bit. And so I think in time he'll be able to be out here more with us without, you know, maybe I'll be able to put him on a long leash, you know, out here on the patio or something like that. But he's the first dog I've had in my entire life that I didn't have off leash or have the ability to be off leash. I'm not saying I'm walking Holly around the neighborhood off leash. She's on a leash, but there's always slack in the leash. It's as if she's not on a leash, basically. And she was off leash at the nursery and at the garden center and, you know, at the house and here in the backyard. I mean, she never needed it. That's every dog I've ever owned until this one. And he is just, I'm not, you know, I don't know what it is. I don't know why. But he's just busy. He's busy. I got to be busy. And I think that's what would get him gone. And he would be just as sad as us once he realized he couldn't figure out how to get back to his all his toys and his pretty happy life here. Let's see. So somebody says, I talk a lot about clay. What about my sand? A couple other people had chimed in. It's really not that big of a difference. The one reason obviously clay comes up a lot is because I have a clay-based soil here in Raleigh, and it can cause some root rot related issues for some of these plants that I'm putting in this garden. So that's the reason I probably bring it up more, because it's my existence. Not anymore. The soil's so improved now, you have to go down pretty deep before you find the red clay in this garden at this point. There's a topsoil layer that we've managed to create above that clay, which would have been here. When this was a wooded space, you know, 100 years ago, there would have been a topsoil layer here. You know, it got scraped, you know, when the houses were built. So we've kind of rebuilt that, and so I don't have to spend as much time talking about it. There's really no difference in your sand. The issue with your sandy soil typically is that water is going to fall through it pretty quick. And with that, nutrients are going to fall through it pretty quick. And so what we want to do is slow water and nutrients. And so it's really about building a topsoil layer on top of it, same as here. So it's same strategies of, if you're starting from nothing, wood chips would be the best way in. If you're starting, you know, if you're just amending what you have, continuing to use hardwood, triple shredded hardwood mulch, or, you know, you compost, or, you know, anything that you can add to the top of it that kind of slows that nutrient drop. And one of the things is some nutrients are heavier than others. So as an example, I think calcium's bigger than magnesium, and so it can sink in the soil in time. So you can actually lose nutrients falling through the profile of the soil. So again, anything we can do to keep whatever little bit of fertilizer we're going to use, and leaving the leaves out there, and all the things that we're feeding from the top, we don't want that to just fall through down into deeper soil. It's one of the reasons that tilling was so effective. When humans discovered that we could flip the soil over, one of the reasons it was so effective, well, there's a lot of reasons. One, it aerated the soil, allowed corn or wheat or whatever the heck we were growing to grow deeper into the soil during the season, having more access to water, air, and nutrients. But it also brought up those deep nutrients to the top. Okay, has a diminishing return because you're killing the life in the soil as you're doing it, and you're causing erosion, and you're causing, you know, wind erosion and washing erosion, and it has a diminishing return. But initially, it has a fantastic return because it takes those heavier nutrients and brings them up to the top and remixes them and gets them up in our soil. That's why you might, you know, when I talk about tilling is killing. Initially, if you're starting something new down there, it might be beneficial to flip it over and then put wood chips down on top of it or compost down on top of it before you get started. And then you want to keep that organic layer up on top to slow the dropping of those things again. Okay. Somebody says they pruned their Rosa Sharon in the fall hard because of insects. And it has very thick stems on an established shrub, but now every cut point turned black. The stems are alive. I'm not going to worry about that at all. It'd be tough to kill one of those, a Rosa Sharon. You might, once it leafs back out and starts to rebranch, if those blackened cuts are way above, you know, the new branching that's happening on the plant, you might go back in there and put a fresh cut a little bit lower. So get those cuts slightly closer to where the branching is, and don't leave 3 inches of dead wood to just rot away above the new branching, if that makes any sense, because that could end up potentially being an entry point. So use it after it leafs back out, starts creating new branching, just clean them up. But I'm not worried about the off coloration of the ends of the stems at all. Let's see. Number 15. I don't know if I'm going fast or not. I have no idea how much time this has been. This person's in Zone 5B, west of Chicago. They've got some mature yews that are too large. Can they reduce them from 4 to 3 feet? Should they slowly make it smaller or do it all at once? They don't want to scalp it. The earlier you did it, it may be a little early in Chicago at this point, but I want to get it while the sun's still kind of on a little bit of a low angle. If I could do it before the risk of burning the inside of the plant severely, I'd want to do that. So probably for me up there, sometime around the 1st of April, I would cut them like you want to cut them. I'd go ahead and take them down. I would not do that same operation in June or July when the sun is fully up above you up there, because you know it's going to burn anything that's not been exposed to the sunlight. So you know, just like if I go to the beach, you know, in May 15th and I have never exposed my skin to the sun, you know, you get burned much worse that first time out. That's the same thing that will happen in that shrub. You're exposing parts that haven't seen the sunlight while it's still on fairly low angle. Or you can look at the forecast and see if you have 3 cloudy days coming up. That may be helpful as well, and just go ahead and cut them down to where you want to cut them. I just go ahead and get it over with. So somebody said, what are the important factors you use to plant and maintain the razzmatazz grape that's on the shed? So I have a grapevine growing across the top of the shed back there. The person is doing it too, but they're intimidated. Just plant it like you'd plant any other plant. It was planted fairly close to the shed. It's probably going to take a full season to get limbs that are long enough to start attaching it up there, but you need to create some attachment points. It'll wrap around anything that it creates those little modified leaves that it wraps around things. So once I put a nail in the side there, and I attached it the first time with a little strap. But once it got up to the top, there's just 3 nails across the top of the shed up there with a wire running between them. And it follows that wire pretty well on its own. The one thing to know about vines, just in general, is 90% of the growth they do is going to be in the first 60 days of spring. So from that thing will leaf out probably April 5th. And between April 5th and June 5th, almost all the growing it's going to do in a year is going to happen there. And so you need to be on top of it during that period of time, making sure you're feeding it through the wiring or whatever you're trying to grow it on. Otherwise, it'll just become a giant pile. But so the thing about these kind of questions about being scared of something in the garden, this is kind of what the questions that I've been answering for 39 years in this business, most of them are related to, I don't want to hurt it. I don't want to kill it. I paid good money for it. It's an important plant to me. It's doing a function that I don't want to lose and that kind of thing. So pretty much, a lot of folks can be intimidated, by some of the things that we're trying to do. But keep in mind with this vine, this is where I want to get, you can, if you mess it up and you don't do any of what I just said and it just becomes a big pile on the ground, you can cut it in half and start over. So it won't matter at all. So you can, that vine will be very forgiving over anything that happens between now and then. Because I just let it pile up on itself in the corner. If you guys will remember, in the beginning of last year, it was just a big pile in the corner. I had meant to run it across the top for a long time and I hadn't done it. So I cut 3/4 of the material out of the top of it and started a new piece going across. I put the wire in place and then I ran it across there. And now it looks pretty good across the top. But I kind of took a year off from it and watched it just become a pile on itself. So don't worry about it. Just, you know, even if you don't get it right, it's completely repairable. That's the beauty of that very fast growing grapevine. Let's see. This person's in zone 8B, 9A, South Carolina. They got elephant ears and caladiums they purchased. Should they plant them in pots or directly in the ground now? So wherever I don't know where your average last frost date is for you. It's probably April 1st-ish. So you could just leave them in the bags that you bought them in for now and keep them in kind of a dry, cool place inside the house in a closet or something, and then plant them in just a few weeks. Or if you wanted to, you could jumpstart them in a container. For me, my frost-free date is probably a couple weeks after yours, so I would probably put them in a pot and let them start to grow. So I would just base it on that. If you're in like zone 9, you're very close to being able to put these things that might be hurt by frost or freeze, these kind of semi-tropical things. They're not tropical, they'll take a freeze, but they need to be in the ground for some period of time before they take that first freeze. And they've been in a store probably in a warm place. So this first year, you want to wait until your average last frost date or slightly after. You're so close to that, you can just hold them just like they are and for a couple of weeks probably. For me, I would pot them. For somebody further north, you definitely you would. You want to pot them into a container, keep them mobile where you can bring them in when it's going to get cold, maybe get a little jump start on them. That would be caladiums, elephant ears, dahlias, any of those things you're buying, the corms or tubers this time of year. You can get started that way. But you're in an area where I'd almost go, 2 weeks, I can put them in the ground, so I'll just keep them in a closet for now. Let's see. This person has a volunteer red bud with a kind of it comes up as a single trunk and then it has a fork going like this right here with 4 foot. It's got a 4-foot stem and then these 2 4-foot branches. Should they cut one branch to have a main leader or tip prune both to initiate branching? I just tip prune the 2 of them. I think that's high enough on a red bud. You're not going to get a red bud typically with a single trunk that's 8 or 10 feet tall. You know, it's just not that kind of tree, really. These lower growing ornamental trees tend to branch around 4 feet. That yours probably branched at just about the height that would be normal for them to branch, you know, to put on that first initial branching. And I just go up to the top of those and just tip prune them. Take 2 inches off the top of those 2 branches, and that'll force some additional branching on those 2 branches up here. If you get branching down on that main trunk, you may still get branching down there. I would cut those off if you initiate branching lower than you want. Okay. Let's see. I skipped a couple by accident. So somebody just pointed out that there's 1% sulfur in plant tone. So the difference between plant tone and holly tone is holly tone has like 3% sulfur and plant tone has 1% sulfur. So I use holly tone if I'm trying to, if I was trying to manipulate the soil to be slightly more acidic for some acid-loving plants like holly tone, right? Or azaleas or camellias or rhododendrons. But this person said, well, plant tone has 1% sulfur as well. Yeah, and again, the bag on the plant tone says you just use it, you know, it's the everything fertilizer. So they've got rose tone and tree tone and flower tone and holly tone and all the other tones. But plant tone is kind of my just go-to. My soil doesn't really need correcting in any way. I don't need to change anything out here, so it's just the go-to all-around fertilizer. Okay, somebody says, can I change or amend anaerobic compost, then can it be used? Yes, I would just spread it out and let the sun work on it temporarily for a little while. So anaerobic just means it probably stayed wet for too long. It has kind of a funky smell to it. And I'll note, so I've done a couple of videos on not trying to discourage people from using landscape fabric for weed control, because I've gone in and pulled that stuff up in the future. One of the many reasons not to cover the earth in plastic, but one of them is when I've pulled that stuff up in the future, the soil smells awful underneath it. It holds moisture, it traps moisture underneath it, and then where we want to have those healthy kind of earthy smells that you get when you're out here gardening, that are beneficial bacteria, beneficial fungi, all the smells of things working properly. When you smell the opposite of that, anaerobic conditions, you'll know what I mean. And it's just, can be funky. And even that, when I talked about compost earlier, you can open one of those bags of compost, even some cow manure and stuff, you can open it and go, wow, it's not just because it was manure. The manure smell should have been gone, but you'll get this really funky smell from it. And that's, you know, just it's bad bacteria has taken the place of beneficial bacteria. And so, but yeah, you can kill that stuff off probably just by spreading it out and drying it out. That would be my suggestion, is get it out of the wet conditions that it's in now. And you can reverse those conditions. Heck, pulling that fabric up and getting it off the ground and just getting the sun back on it and drying that soil out will start correcting those conditions as well. This person has an oleander in a pot in Texas, spent 6 days below freezing with no protection. The leaves look dead. The stems have dieback on them, but they're still alive. Should they cut it down to live tissue or overall hard prune it? I would just cut it down to the live tissue. Same thing as I just said on that pomegranate. Just figure out, you can scratch on the stem, or you could bend them. They'll probably break where they're dead. When you'll get down to a part where they're pliable and scratch it, see if there's a little green under there, and then cut it down to that level. Or again, you can just simply wait for them to leaf back out, and that'll tell you where it's alive, and you can just cut it down to that spot at that time. Either way, doesn't really matter how that goes. I don't know how I had somehow skipped just past 3 over there. Somebody's got an endless summer hydrangea, but it probably doesn't matter. Any kind of big leaf or French hydrangea, hydrangea macrophylla. It's on a west-facing side of their house for 3 years. It burns in the summer sun. Will it adapt to it, or should they relocate it to a shadier spot? I see the occasional big leaf hydrangea here. I don't know where this person is. I mean, obviously, if you were in upstate New York, you can grow big leaf hydrangeas in lots of sun. Here in the South, though, we tend to have to protect them in the shade a bit, and it leaves them in a situation where then they stretch and they don't bloom as well. So there's a very delicate sweet spot here where west-facing sun is probably going to have it a little cooked in the late summer, but you may get a lot of flowers, and it may be compact and not floppy. And then if you move it to too shady of a spot, it stretches and it's thin, and when it flowers, it flops over and it doesn't have as many flowers on it. Real delicate balance here in the South for where to grow big leaf hydrangea. So my dear Dolores over here is getting probably 6 good hours of direct sun every day, and it's happy, compact, full, and blooms pretty much all summer. It's also the Ramotin one. I actually think it's where a lot of the breeding came from on those, was from that particular plant that just blooms and blooms and blooms. But there is a sweet spot. Be careful not to move it into too much shade to correct for it. If it's been blooming and it's been full and been in pretty good shape, and your biggest complaint is it's a bit burnt in August, I might leave it there. And it will adapt definitely more in time for sure, but it won't probably ever completely adapt to that kind of west side facing sun. So I'll leave that up to you, but I'd be careful. You can definitely overdo the shade and end up with a very different plant. Let's see, there are 4 more. Somebody said we should revisit Denny Werner's landscape this year, or is a question, are we going to? I haven't gotten up with Denny in a little while, but I'd love to. I'd love that garden. If you haven't seen that garden, that's definitely worth watching. He is the person who has released a lot of these red buds out. That Golden Falls red bud, the weeping red bud that's back here, that's Denny's. A lot of butterfly bushes that were in the Proven Winners brand. A lot of introductions that Denny has done, and his perennial border at his house is unbelievable. It's just one of the most incredible home gardens. So yes, at some point we'd love to go back over to Denny's and film again. He's such a nice guy too, like as so many people in this business are. So somebody has a small tree-formed Carol Mackey Daphne. How much is safe to prune off after blooming? Boy, I don't prune healthy Daphne. This is almost like a trick question here. Make sure your pruners are clean. Make sure you're, maybe disinfect them before you use them. And then, you can, I would lightly tip prune it if it needs it, and that's about what I would do on it. I'm just not going to go. I'm not going to go to town on a Daphne pruning it. Just, you know, they can go from healthy, happy to dead so fast, and so I'm going to be careful with that question and tell you to lightly prune it with disinfected pruners, or don't prune it at all. Two more. Somebody asked what plant ID apps do we recommend. PlantNet was definitely, for me, for a long time, was the best, to me, the best one. I didn't have to pay for it, and it was straightforward. ID things pretty much, you know, most of the time. You can use iNaturalist, and you know, there's a few others, but Google Lens has really become the one that I use more than anything. It's just literally Google Lens, an app for your phone, and Google has access to all of our photos, which we've all labeled, and so it has an unbelievable, an uncanny ability, you know, for me to take a photo of anything and then, you know, and come up with it. Here's a euphorbia that I just took a photo of. You know, just an unbelievable. Euphorbia is pretty easy to identify, but you know, you get the drift. You can take a photo with anything with Google Lens. It doesn't even have to be a plant. It can literally be a brick or a pair of pruners or a pair of jeans or anything you want to take a photo of, and it has this unbelievable ability to identify it. So Google Lens has probably become one of the more accurate ones for me to use. And when we wear PlantNet, and a few of them, some struggle is a bit when we're out botanizing, when we're really not taking pictures of ornamental plants out here in the garden, but we're out in the woods taking photos of things. Google Lens somehow still knows, you know, it's probably also using my location data, which is probably helping it figure out, you know, what that plant is as well. So anyway, interesting. Somebody's in zone 7 in Western Kentucky. Will the windmill palm that I showed off, which is right here, it was in the background of last week's Q&A video. Let's see if that will come all the way around here. Yeah, I think the issue is, though, you would probably get a winter every few years that would have the potential to damage it. So it might be for several years you'd have to think about covering it or protecting it. So it's hard to say, really, whether it would grow for you. This was from a seed strain from windmill palm from Greensboro that saw -3 degrees or -5 degrees. I can't remember what it was now. And this seed strain's been around for a while now, that people have passed around. And I know, I think Swift Creek Nursery grows these. They're wholesale, but they're, I think they have a spot at the farmer's market. And also they sell to a bunch of the garden centers here in our area, but this thing grows in the wintertime. So we've been talking about how cold it is and the cold damage I have on other things. This thing has produced 3 new big giant leaves in the middle of it this winter. I mean, it's just, it's literally grown all winter long. So cold just doesn't faze this thing. It's kind of amazing. And now the actual palm has reached about 4.5 or 5 feet, the actual bottom part that we, you know, how we measure palms. So it's really starting to gain momentum now. But I would consider it zone 7 hardy with or zone 7A, probably where you are, zone 7A hardy with protection every few winters. This may have been a winter that would have required some protection on it. Winter wet can probably be an issue too, and I do have this one mounded up. It's a moist area over here, but it's mounded up above the grade there. So again, weekly garden planners continues to be $50 off. I think it'll be just 2 weeks left on that. A lot of great information on the weekly garden planner, and I added all the pruning times to it this month. I still need to put the vines up. I've got it done, and I just haven't done it this week. But I'll get that vine pruning information on the weekly garden planner. And then what else did I say? Obviously, the open house garden tickets are also on the website. The open garden is June 20th and 21st. I think we're sold now. Nearly half the tickets are gone. So, you know, I know it's still 3 months away before the open garden, but if you haven't gotten tickets for it yet, I think over half the tickets are gone now. And what was the other thing that I said there at the beginning. Oh, I opened up 1 week in April for for consultations. If you want to go over to the website and get a 50-minute consultation, which is basically you send me some photos, tell me where you live, and we can go through some change of plans. Sometimes there is. I've done consultations so far this spring on how to start a nursery, how to prune particular plants, just going through damaged gardens to doing some sort of basic design, whatever we can do in a Zoom meeting in 50 minutes. So all over the place. So, you kind of dictate what we talk about there for 50 minutes and try to get as much out of it as we possibly can. Thanks for watching, guys.